Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hopefully we've got the live stream set up correctly. It seemed to go okay yesterday, but I am getting used to all the software bits and pieces at the moment. I've just been talking to myself for about 5 minutes before I realised the stream was actually live, so I'm starting again from scratch now. So as the name suggests, in today's live stream we're going to be looking at the JavaScript exercises again, and in particular the repository that we set up and I introduced you to yesterday. So essentially the repository, if you missed it, is all, or it will be all of the exercises that are on my YouTube channel. But just in code, so you can actually download the repository and run tests against them, and that will obviously give you some immediate feedback as to whether you've met the criteria or not. So just a couple of things before we start looking at some of the code today. I was just going to mention thank you very much to the 2 people who gave me stars on the repository yesterday. It's not really important, it was just interesting to see if you got any feedback or the interest that you've got in the repository itself and doing the tests and doing the exercises. Okay, and so yeah, thank you very much to those people. I just wanted to point out as well that the whole idea behind putting the tests in place as well is kind of also as well as like learning how to make your JavaScript better and to write solutions for the problems, is to also get used to unit testing as well. So both looking at existing unit tests and making sure they pass, or fixing them if they fail, and also to actually write your own unit tests, which we'll be doing in later live streams as well. So I'll go through how I would create the tests for these exercises given a particular problem. So hello to everyone in the chat. I was just interested as well if you how you feel about unit testing in general as well. So if you want to give me like maybe a thumbs up emoji if you love it, if you like doing it, or if it's something that you really hate or kind of put off, then maybe just give me a thumbs down or some indication to say that you don't like it, and maybe why you don't. Okay, so let's actually crack on with the next exercise. The one I've picked for today is going to be the second exercise in the very first video I did, which was to write a JavaScript program, although it'll just be a function or a line of code to get the extension of a file name. So I've mixed it up a little bit, and you'll see why in just a second. But in the repository, I've made a few changes to just add that second exercise to start off with. But also in package.json, you can see there's another script there now as well. So if we run npm run exercise 2, it will just run the tests for exercise 2. So you can isolate those and work on one at a time if you like, rather than getting loads of test failures because you haven't actually finished some of the solutions. I did notice something a bit weird with jest as well. It's not weird, it is kind of expected, but it's just a little quirk. If you want to run your tests in watch mode, which I mentioned yesterday, you can use -- and then -- watch, and that will pass the watch flag to jest. And if you do that, it does work. But if you then press A, I don't know if you can see that on the screen here, you've got press A to run all tests. It will actually run all of the files that you've got set up, including exercise 1, and when the rest of them are there as well, it kind of it'll run everything on the repository. So one thing we can do just to get around that, just to get back into the tests for exercise 2, is to press the T button here, and you can see we're running the active filter for exercise 2, and just hit enter, and it will just run the exercise 2 tests and nothing else, but it'll be in watch mode. So as we're making changes to the code, we should see some live updates in here. Okay. So yeah, doing unit testing proper. So yeah, we're just looking at some basic sort of code at the moment. So some JavaScript functions that we're just going to run. We can get more involved. I have done a few other videos where we looked at testing with React and also using the Mocha and Chai libraries as well. So you can always check those out. This is just kind of like getting into your coding exercises, but having some immediate feedback. And when we come into maybe tomorrow's stream, we'll do some unit testing, so I will go through how to actually write some basic unit tests, and maybe it'll get more advanced as we write some more complex code. So hopefully that answers your question there. Okay, so let's have a look at exercise 2. We're going to look at the spec file first and see what tests we've actually got in here. So I've kind of elaborated on the original exercise from here. It's very basic. I don't know how anyone really understood that. I guess you get the gist of it, but it's just could do with a bit more detail as to what you're actually trying to write code for. So in the test I've said we need to write a JavaScript function, so specifically a function here this time, to get the extension of a file name provided as a string. And as an extension with multiple period separators should be considered as the entire extension. So I don't really know if .config.js, for example, is the full file extension. It's probably not. It's probably just the .js. But just to mix it up for the tutorial today, I just thought I'd do it so we can use some different code, and yeah, that's what the tests actually are looking for. Okay, so just run you through there's 4 tests, as you can see here. They're all failing at the moment, and so we should return the extension of a file name and a string. So we've got index.html, JPEG, and .text, and we should get the everything after the period in the output. So in the original one, I think if we look in the video and just skip forward a few seconds, I think what we actually got in the output here, you can see in the browser console, we actually got the period on there as well. So that probably shouldn't be there if you're actually using this code for something. So yeah, we'll actually remove the period as well this time. And then there's another test which is just testing for those multiple periods in the string. So we've got jest.config, babel.config, so we should get this as the output each time. Okay, and then the other thing is I've put some tests. I was going to go through this yesterday, I kind of forgot, but for exercise 1, but put some tests in there so if things go wrong. So what if the string that's passed into the function doesn't actually have an extension, if it's just a piece of text? So either the function's been used wrong, or for whatever reason that file just doesn't have an extension on it. So we should expect the output from this to be an empty string. And then just to kind of go a bit one step further than that as well, what if the function's called with some bad values essentially? So an empty string, or null, or defined, or just something which shouldn't be there. Then we should expect obviously these values here to be an empty string. So just putting in some safeguards into our function to actually handle any sort of falsy values that are passed into the function. Okay, so I think we're now, hopefully you understand the actual tests that we've got to pass, and they're all listed here obviously. So we're going to write some code to do this. So I think there might be a little bit of delay on the stream as well, but if you do have any ideas of how you would do this, maybe you've done the exercise before on the tutorial on the YouTube channel, but yeah, if you've got any, just shout it out in the chat. I'll probably have kind of solved it by the time you get around to it anyway, but that's fine. So the first thing is we want to make sure that we're getting the extension, and then actually returning the extension to from the function, so that it makes that the first test pass where we're actually looking for the extensions. So you might be tempted to do something like this. So you might say something like string dot last index of, which is exactly what I used in the original tutorial, and the last index of where the period is. And then once you've got that position, that will give you a kind of number as to where the last occurrence of the period is in the string. Then we can slice it, so we can say string.slice based on that position, and then just return that as the extension. So that should find where the period is, and then just chop out everything that comes after that. But you should see, if we just save that a bit further up here, okay, so we get some JS there. Sorry, this is the first test. So the first test is failing, so we're expecting just to have the string of HTML, but of course we're getting .html as the output. So the simple way to fix that is just to get rid of the period. So instead of finding the last index of the period and then just slicing everything after that, we can just add 1 onto the number that's returned from this function, and you should find we're getting 1 pass name, and that should be the first one, which is up here. It doesn't show us the output there, but you can see there that we're getting the extension from the string is working okay, because we're getting everything after the period and actually not including it, so it's matching the string we're looking for in the test. Okay, so moving on to the second test, you can see that's actually failing. So we're expecting the whole file extension there. We're expecting config.js, and we just received JS, which might be fine, which might be what we're after. But the actual test is failing, so we need to make sure that this gets satisfied here. So instead of using the last index of, there is another function that we can use, which is probably simpler anyway, which is index of. So instead of finding the last index of the period, it's going to find the first occurrence of it. So that will be, there's a period just before .config.js. So that is going to be where we want to start slicing the string for this particular test. And it should also work for the other test as well, because there's only just one period within the actual string. So you can see now that second test is now passing, because we're now slicing on the first index of the period, and we're getting all of the string after that. So that's all good, that's okay, that's working. Just these other two tests for the falsy values aren't working. So what happens with these index of functions, I think it's the same for both, and you may have seen this before as well, is it will give you a number of -1, -1, if it doesn't actually find an occurrence of that string or that particular character in the string itself. So if that is the case, then it just is going to be slicing from -1, -1, all the way to the end of the string. So in this instance, we're actually getting index here. Because if we look in the actual spec itself, that's what we're passing in. So it's just returning the whole string basically. So we need to put something in place for that to make sure that we don't just return the string. So what we could do, for example, instead of just returning that straight away, we could say the period index is equal to this, and we'll store that value. And then we can say if period index is equal to -1, so we know that it hasn't found a period within the original string that's passed into the function, then what we can do is we can return an empty string. And if it hasn't, then what we need to do is do that slicing thing here, which is what we've got here. So let's just take that off here. There we go, the period index is the index of result from that function. And then we'll say string.slice and reuse that period index value and add one to it again, just so we're cutting off the period from the string that we're returning. And you can see we've got 3 passing now, and the one that was previously failing, where it's just returning index, is now passing, because we've got this check in here to make sure that if period index is -1, then just to return the empty string. So the final thing is, as we looked at initially, is we've got these 3 examples here, as if we pass in null or falsy values into the empty string, into the function, sorry, then we should obviously get an empty string back. So we could do something right at the top here, just saying something like if not string, then we could return an empty string from here. Save that. So you need to be careful, obviously, if you're using the not operator, because it's just going to convert that into a Boolean. So there are a few examples, such as 0, which will return false as well, and trigger this if statement. But I think for this example, that's fine. I can't imagine where you would have a file name that just was called 0, but it might be something that you want to check in there if that was something that you were using in your real code. So if we just compare that to the original solution that we had on the original YouTube video, you can see it's quite basic. We're just using string.slice and the index of, but we're not really taking into consideration a lot of those other cases, like if we pass in an empty string, or if there are any problems finding a period within the string as well. So hopefully, although this isn't as neat and as tidy, we haven't got the one-liner that you might expect from such a simple function. What we do have is a more robust function because it's catering for all of those different test cases, in particular looking for those sort of faulty values and looking and handling those different types of edge cases which have been set out in the actual test file itself in the tests here. Okay, so that's that exercise pretty much finished. I'm going to leave the stream there for today, but what I will mention is that tomorrow what we'll look at is the next exercise in that tutorial. But what we'll do is, instead of just going through the code with some example tests, what we'll do is we'll actually think about what tests we need to write to satisfy the actual solution for the exercise. So we'll get an understanding of the next exercise. We'll write some unit tests for them, get an idea of how to do that, and then we'll finally write the code just to satisfy those unit tests, just to make sure that the code, the function that we're going to write, is meeting all the different criteria. But that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.